Hello and welcome to a new edition of True Audio Files. Today, as you saw in the title, I'm going to be doing a shootout with Stone Temple Pilots' Tiny Music, whatever the subtitle to it is, Songs from the Vatican Gift Shop. The reason why I'm doing that is there is a new MoFi version that just came out here, and I have number 616. I don't think they have an actual listing. They just said it's a special edition. They don't specify how many are actually being made. But anyways, so this one is a 45 RPM. So 2 LPs cut from digital, which was a digitized version of the master tape that MoFi made a copy of. And I don't really have very many versions of this on record. I've had it for years on CD, but never had well, I shouldn't say never had the vinyl, because I did recently. A couple years ago, I don't remember exactly when it was, but there's no date on this, but they came out with a super deluxe version of it, which basically came with, I believe it was, yeah, three CDs. And then there was also a record that came in it as well. And that record was cut by Chris Bellman. I can't say with certainty, but if I had to venture a guess, I would venture that it was cut from a digital source. So, but it looks like that this album did originally have an analog master tape. So the MoFi was digitally transferred from that tape, and then they cut to the 45 RPM 2 LP set. So basically, to give you an idea of how I do most of these, just to let you understand how I go about these. First thing as I do is I try to level match them, and so when I play them back, they are going to be playing at very close to the same volume level. I actually have a sound level meter, and I try to get them within about a half a dB to a dB at most. And I got pretty close on this one. And then I basically listen to the new reissue, in this case, all the way through, try to figure out what songs I think will make the best A-B comparison, as you can't really listen to a whole album and just kind of do an A-B that way. You kind of have to go back and forth quickly between the same track and A-B them in that way to get the best results and best ability to kind of tell the differences between them. So in this case, I did Trippin' on a Hole in a Paper Heart. Basically, it was the first song on the second side, and the first song on the second record, on the first side of the second record. So it was made it quick and easy, and it actually sounded very good as well. I thought it had some good stuff going on to make it a good song to do a comparison with. So first thing right off the bat, I listened to the MoFi, and when I listened to it, the one thing that really caught me, and something that was super noticeable, was really powerful bass. I mean, it definitely had more bass than I recall the album having, and in my opinion, that's a good thing. And it was powerful, it was tight, it was accurate bass in terms of, it didn't sound distorted. It may be more than, I probably would maybe classify as maybe not quite neutral sounding, but certainly I didn't think it had too much bass. It was really great, powerful, kind of kick you in the chest bass that sounded really good. Had a good wide sound stage, had a decent depth to the sound stage as well. You can place all the instruments and the vocals really well within that sound stage. And just, I thought it sounded very good. Not audiophile level by any stretch, but definitely good. So then I put on this Chris Bellman cut that was done a couple years ago. And, it sounded very good too. Definitely didn't have the bass, the powerful bass that I was talking about on the MoFi. It definitely had decent bass. It definitely would probably classify it as maybe a little bit more neutral sounding, if you will, but definitely didn't have the power that the MoFi had, especially on the bass response. And it did sound like it was a little bit noisier, but I think that's mainly just because it wasn't cut anywhere near as loud as the MoFi, which, that's one of the advantages that the Mobile Fidelity had by splitting it up onto 2 LPs and doing 45 RPM. Because I think it's about a 56-ish minute album. But that gives you the grooves, more room to breathe, if you will, so they can actually cut it louder. So, the surface noise becomes a lot less relevant on that cut. And, that was clearly noticeable here as well. Both are still really pressed really well. So I don't want to take anything away from the Chris Bellman cut, because it definitely still, in my opinion, sounded really good. It was still pretty quiet, but because it had to be cut lower because of it being on one LP, it sounded like it was a little noisier. So, but I would say that the Chris Bellman definitely sounded really good. But I think the one thing that I also kind of noticed is, I think, at least it felt this way. I don't really have a good way of testing this, but it did feel like the Chris Bellman may have been a little bit more compressed, because it didn't have quite the same soundstage depth. The width was pretty much identical or nearly identical, but that soundstage depth was definitely not there on the Bellman cut. And the instruments and everything sort of felt like it lost that 3D feel a little bit. And I don't know if it's a combination of, the EQ that they had, but I also think that the Bellman cut may have been compressed a little bit more than the Mobile Fidelity. So the Mobile Fidelity maybe had a little bit more dynamics, which kind of gave you that more 3D depth to it, and just had the better definition. When you could listen to all the instruments, you could really place them better in the mix, or in the sound stage, I should say, not necessarily in the mix, on the Mobile Fidelity one. So, but I have to say, this is just like the one thing that it did for me is I forgot how much I love this album. Probably a very close second in terms of my favorite Stone Temple Pilots albums, which Purple is my favorite. And I would say, and Stone Temple Pilots were probably my favorite band back in the 90s, when they were making their albums, these albums. So, it was really great to be able to see this finally come out by someone, and Mobile Fidelity did a great job. I actually, you're comparing apples to oranges here, but I honestly like the sound and the feel of this one. I definitely think it is noticeably better than the other version that I have, in comparison to the Analog Productions versions of Core and Purple that were released, I think it was last year, as part of the 75th anniversary of Atlantic. So I honestly liked the sound of this one. I think they did a better job personally. Again, it's comparing apples and oranges, but I just wasn't as big of a fan of the Analog Productions ones. They were good, but they didn't blow me away. Like, this one definitely was noticeably powerful, in your face, or in your chest, if you will. And those ones just didn't have that feeling for me like this did. So take that for what you will. I would say that, this isn't outrageously expensive. It's not a one step. So I think they retail for $60, and you should definitely get it if you like this album, because I think it's probably the best it's sounded on this Mobile Fidelity. So definitely a favorite of mine. It definitely is going to be something I'm going back to often, again and again. So, that's kind of my take. I'd be curious to hear what you guys have to say. If any of you have maybe an original release that when it came out in the 90s, and if you've compared it to this new Mobile Fidelity, and get your thoughts on that. And I've just never seen one out in the wild. If I saw one, I definitely would buy it, because I found a Purple. I don't think I ever found a Core, but I definitely found a Purple. And I have a video that I did last year that compared the original Purple to the Analog Productions one. So couldn't find one of those for Tiny Music Songs from the Vatican gift shop, but it was one of those things that I got what I got. The Chris Bellman cut is still a pretty respectable person cutting this, and still sounded very good, just the Mobile Fidelity sounded better. So again, that's everything I've got. I wanted to hear your thoughts. Leave those comments in the comments section. If you liked what you saw here, please hit the like button. I want to thank you for subscribing, if you do subscribe. If you don't, please hit that subscribe button too. I'd love to get some new subscribers if I could. So that is everything. So I want to say thank you very much. I want you to have yourself a good rest of the day and a good rest of the week. Thanks a lot.